Welcome to my channel, and today we are going to talk about the horrific crimes that John Wayne Gacy committed. In Norwood Park Township, Illinois, close to Chicago, John Wayne Gacy, an American serial killer and sex offender, raped, tortured, and killed at least 33 young men and boys between March 17, 1942, and May 10, 1994. Due to his public appearances as Pogo the Clown or Patches the Clown, personas he had created before his murders were discovered, he came to be known as the Killer Clown. All of Gacy's murders took place within his ranch-style home in Norwood Park Township. He would usually entice a victim to his house, where he would deceive them into donning handcuffs by pretending to perform a magic trick. After torturing and raping his victim, he would either asphyxiate them or strangle them with a garrote to death. 13 more victims were interred somewhere on his property, while 4 bodies were dumped in the Des Plaines River. 26 victims were buried in the crawl space of his house. Gacy had previously been found guilty of sodomizing a juvenile boy in Waterloo, Iowa, in 1968. He was given a 10-year jail sentence, but he only served 18 months of it. After divorcing his second wife in 1976, he murdered at least 30 additional victims after killing his first victim in 1972, twice more by the end of 1975. On March 13, 1980, Gacy received a death penalty verdict. He spent a lot of time painting while incarcerated at Menard Correctional Center on death row. On May 10, 1994, he was put to death at Stateville Correctional Center by lethal injection. The sole son of John Stanley Gacy and Marion Elaine Gacy, née Robeson, and the second of their 3 children, John Wayne Gacy, was born in Edgewater Hospital in Chicago, Illinois, on March 17, 1942. Gacy had a close relationship with his mother and 2 sisters, but he struggled with his alcoholic father, who physically abused his family, frequently calling his son dumb and stupid. In 1949, Gacy's father learned that his son and another boy had been discovered touching a young girl inappropriately. As a form of discipline, his father spanked him with a razor strop. The same year, Gacy would occasionally be molested in his truck by a family friend and contractor. Gacy kept this a secret from his father because of fear that he would be held accountable. Gacy slept on a cot behind the embalming room as a mortuary assistant. He spent his 3 months there watching the embalming of corpses and occasionally acting as a pallbearer. Later, Gacy admitted that he had entered the coffin of a deceased teenage boy while alone, hugging and touching the body before becoming startled. Gacy enrolled at Northwestern Business College despite not having completed his high school education. After receiving his diploma in 1963, he joined the Nunn-Bush Shoe Company as a management trainee. He proposed to his coworker Marlon Myers in March of that year. After completing the required management training, Gacy and his wife moved to Waterloo. In his basement, he established a club where his staff could partake in alcoholic beverages and pool. Despite hiring youth of both sexes for his eateries, Gacy primarily interacted with the young guys. Before making sexual attempts, Gacy provided alcohol to several of them. If they refused, he would argue that his efforts were merely jests or morality tests. A son was born to Gacy's wife in February 1966, and a daughter was born in March 1967. Gacy violated the sexual rights of 15-year-old Donald Voorhees Jr., who was the son of local politician and fellow Gacy Donald E. Voorhees. Gacy used the promise of showing Voorhees the heterosexual stag movies frequently shown at Gacy events to entice him to his home. Before convincing Voorhees to engage in oral intercourse with another guy, Gacy loaded him with wine, let him watch a stag movie, and said, "You have to have sex with a man before you start having sex with women." In the months that followed, Gacy also mistreated a number of other young people, including one whom he had sex with before blackmailing into having oral sex with him. Gacy also deceived a number of kids into thinking he was hired to carry out gay experimentation and paid them up to $50 each. Voorhees informed his father that Gacy had sexually attacked him in March 1968. Voorhees Sr. called the police right away, who then apprehended Gacy and filed charges against him for attempting to assault 16-year-old Edward Lynch and engaging in oral sodomy on Voorhees. Gacy angrily refuted the accusations and insisted on taking a polygraph examination. When Gacy denied any involvement in regards to both young men, the findings of these tests were indicative of deception. Voorhees Sr. had opposed Gacy's bid for appointment as president of the Iowa Jaycees. Therefore, Gacy publicly denied any misconduct and maintained the accusations against him were politically driven. Many other Jaycees rallied to Gacy's cause after finding his account to be convincing. However, Gacy was charged with sodomy on May 10, 1968. On November 7, 1968, Gacy entered a plea of guilty to a sodomy charge against Voorhees but not guilty to the allegations against the other young people. Voorhees allegedly offered himself to Gacy, and Gacy responded out of curiosity. His explanation was not accepted. On December 3, Gacy was found guilty of sodomy and given a 10-year prison term to be served at the Anamosa State Penitentiary. The same day, Gacy's wife filed a divorce suit and asked for exclusive custody of their 2 kids, the couple's house and other assets, and alimony. The divorce was formalized on September 18, 1969, when the court made a decision in her favor. Gacy lost contact with his first wife and kids forever. On June 18, 1970, Gacy was granted parole with a year's probation after serving 18 months of his 10-year sentence. Gacy's probation included requirements that he move in with his mother in Chicago. Until his capture in December 1978, he lived at 8213 West Somerdale Avenue, where he allegedly committed all of his murders, according to Gacy. Gacy and his mother had just moved into the home when, in August 1971, he proposed to Carol Hoff, whom he had briefly dated in high school. The couple wed on July 1, 1972. Soon after the couple announced their engagement, Carol and her 2 young girls from a previous marriage moved into Gacy's house. Just before the wedding, his mother left the house. Gacy revealed his bisexuality to his wife in 1975. He told her this would be the last time they ever had sex after they had it on Mother's Day of that particular year. He started spending most of his evenings away from home and would come home in the early hours of the morning, claiming he had been working late or attending meetings. Carol found gay pornography inside the house along with men's wallets and identification. She also saw Gacy bringing teenage males into his garage in the early morning hours. She questioned Gacy about who the owner of these objects was, and he retorted violently that it was none of her business. In October 1975, Carol and Gacy got into a fight about Carol's inability to balance a checkbook accurately. Carol then requested a divorce. A Jolly Joker clown organization, whose members routinely performed at fundraising events and parades in addition to freely amusing sick youngsters, came to Gacy's attention through his membership in a nearby Moose organization. Late in 1975, Gacy joined the Clown Club and developed his own clown personas, including Pogo the Clown and Patches the Clown, with his own makeup and attire. He characterized Patches as a more serious character, compared to Pogo's happy clown persona. Gacy earned the moniker Killer Clown due to his voluntary work as a clown in the years leading up to his killings. Inside his house, Gacy's standard operating procedure was to bribe a young person with alcohol or drugs or otherwise win his trust. After that, he would show a set of handcuffs to show a magic trick, perhaps as part of a clown routine. He used to secretly unlock himself with a key he kept between his fingers after handcuffing his own hands behind his back. Then he volunteered to demonstrate to his prospective victim how to unfasten his own handcuffs. The victim was then manacled and unable to release himself when Gacy said, "The trick is, you have to have the key." This restraint technique used by Gacy on his victim was known as the handcuff trick. After shackling his victim, Gacy started raping and torturing his hostage. Before making his victim fell at him, he typically started by sitting on or straddling himself over the victim's chest. After sodomizing his victim, Gacy tortured him by burning them with cigars, making them impersonate horses while he sat on their backs and yanked on homemade reins around their necks, and violating them with alien objects like dildos and prescription bottles. Gacy frequently manacled his hostages' ankles to a 2x4 with handcuffs attached at each end, an act inspired by the Houston mass murders, to immobilize their legs before indulging in acts of torture. He was known to have pulled or forced numerous victims to crawl into his bathroom, where he partially drowned them in the bathtub before repeatedly reviving them to allow him to continue his protracted assault. He was also known to have verbally ridiculed many of his victims throughout their extended abuse. Gacy would say that he would kill his victim when he chose to in cases where the victim had requested to be killed rather than subjected to further torture. Gacy frequently used a rope tourniquet to strangle his victims' necks before gradually tightening the rope with a hammer handle. He called this trick the rope trick and frequently told his victim, "This is the last trick." At least Gacy typically kept his victims' remains under his bed for up to 24 hours after they passed away before burying them in the crawl space. Here, he would occasionally sprinkle quicklime to expedite the process of decomposition. Before their burial, some victims' bodies were brought to his garage and embalmed. Gacy was detained on June 22 and accused of reckless behavior and aggravated sexual violence. The arrest came as a result of a complaint made by a young person who said that Gacy had lured him into his car with a sheriff's badge, engaged in oral intercourse with him there, and forced him to do so. Gacy said he wanted to clear the air after being notified that the police had discovered human remains in his crawl space and that he would now be charged with murder. He added that he had knew his arrest was imminent since the previous evening, which he had spent on the couch in his attorney's office. He admitted to killing about 30 young men in the early hours of December 22. He said they had all entered his home voluntarily. Although Gacy claimed not to know or recall most of the names, some victims were mentioned by name. He claimed they were all male teenagers who had fled or been forced into prostitution, most of whom he had buried in his crawl space. Gacy spent 14 years on death row in prison after being moved to the Menard Correctional Center following his conviction. Gacy was moved from the Menard Correctional Center to the Stateville Correctional Center in Crest Hill early on May 9, 1994, where he would later be executed. He and his family were permitted to have a private picnic on the jail grounds that afternoon. Gacy placed an order for a bucket of KFC, 12 fried shrimp, French fries, fresh strawberries, and a Diet Coke for his final dinner, before being led to the Stateville execution room for a fatal injection that night. So, this was the story of the killer clown. What a monster. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe and like the video. If you like the video, stay safe.